All right, hey everybody, welcome to the Plague of the Day. I am Ken. With me, as always, are Chris and Nate. And we actually have a guest today because we're going to talk about a subject that I think is really plaguing a lot of people, and people don't really understand it. It's the housing market. Like, Chris, I know you're going through, like, you just moved to a new place, and you're dealing with that.
How was that?
Yeah.
I've got how was it? I mean, it's ongoing. I mean, I moved, but I'm like last week, I'm still surrounded by totes and blah blah blah. And also I am now dealing with like the place we moved to, the cans are like, the trash cans you put out in the street. They're a little smaller and they've got all this extra boxes and getting new furniture, and this might be my plague today, but so I won't get too far into it. But I got a lot of trash and I can't get rid of it as fast as it's
enough.
coming in. Yeah.
What you mean, like stuff that you've accumulated from your past place, like I don't know, pots, pans,
well, that's the totes, but like the trash wise, it's mostly like either boxes that I want to get rid of now. Like I have TV boxes that I've been using I kept them because of moving, specifically because I moved so much. But now I want to get rid of them. But also because I'm getting new furniture, replacing things, and nothing, unless you have the big bucks, nothing comes put together anymore. So I have to put everything together, which means it comes in these boxes, and I got all this trash essentially. So if you want any trash, I'm your guy.
A lot of IKEA.
That kind of idea. We moved further from IKEA, but
Oh, well, good on you, man. I'm proud of you.
Well, we got our guest, and he is a financial or a housing genius, and or that's what I'm gonna say. And his name is Joe Cam, rhymes with lamb, and he's gonna answer our questions that we may have. So
sounds good, man.
Yeah, so here he's coming in, Mr. Joe Cam. Eventually he'll show up, and then we'll cut it.
We hope.
Oh, there he is.
John Kambs, not Joe.
John Cam. I'm sorry.
Good friend.
Come on,
Dang
Ken.
it!
Oh my God,
Joe. I'm so fixated on getting your last name right.
I think Joe Cam sounds better anyway.
Joe Camel, that might have been what you were thinking.
Yeah, well, I was smoking before I came. Yeah. He's outside enjoying life, and we're not.
Well, good on him, man.
Well, it's because his Bears won today, so he's in a good mood.
Yes.
Yeah. So
we're better than the worst team in the league. Great news.
Yeah. Who is the worst team in the league right now?
Carolina, I think, and that's who we beat.
No,
nice.
Dallas can suck it.
Yeah, but I mean, technically, who's the worst?
Yeah,
team?
I think it's either Carolina or the Jaguars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not dissing the Jaguars. Come on.
We're playing them next week.
Oh,
I love the Jaguars.
Yeah.
Come on.
Who's the quarterback that they drafted last year? They're saying is a bust. Zach something.
I don't know who they.
Oh, wait, for the Jags.
Why are they even as quarterback? They got Trevor. I mean, geez.
Yeah, Trevor.
Stadium
Trevor, the dude who was in Remember the Titans.
Yeah, well, no, they're naming the whole stadium after Trevor because of his
Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, no, they're
calling
it the new stadium is like Trev Orver or something like that because he signed a deal with an insurance company and the name Trevor was like ever was part of that. So they're naming the new stadium or the old stadium after Trevor. It's like TRE and then ever. Yeah.
Nice.
So, I don't think they're going to get rid of that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is he
eventually
the guy with the hot mom?
I think, well, he's young, so probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was the guy that like his mom's like smoking hot and it's either him or no, I think it's the other guy though on the Jets. The smaller guy with the blonde hair.
Wait, Jets? That was that's what's the name?
That was Aaron Rodgers, but he started last year. He was the rookie that started last year when Rodgers went down, I believe. Zach.
Okay, I was going to say because Rodgers is back.
Yeah, so, I think he's.
Yeah, and I don't think Rodgers' mom's hot.
Yeah, no, I don't think
Rodgers. Maybe she was. I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen her.
Google her. Look her up. What is? I'm sure there's pictures.
If anyone's going to Google her, it'll be Nate, and he'll get back with us, and he'll let us know.
First thing he talks about next week.
No, Ken and I, now we've been Jaguars fans since back when Brunell was quarterback.
I was briefly a Jags fan because the Browns went away.
I mean, we knew the team.
Yeah,
We knew the trainer.
Yeah.
What was his name?
I don't remember now. It's like, dude, that was like 20 years ago.
I know. It was like back in
Come on, what was the trainer's
like
name?
the second year of their
Brian. Dude, I just messed up, John's name.
We were fans all the way
You're asking
back.
me to remember a dude from 20 years ago.
The NFC Championship, and then they ended up losing. So did Carolina. They were both infancies in the NFL, and they made it to
all
championship games, and then they lost, and it was terrible. But no, Brunell, fantastic. I used to know Andre Rison, running back for Jaguars, used to play for Atlanta, known for that spat that he had, the on-field fight. He was dating oh god, what was her name? Left Eye?
Yeah.
TLC.
Was he the one she burned down his house?
Yeah,
but she ended up dying. But I mean, the two of them used to stop in all the time where my roommate worked, and they were the coolest people in the world. I loved both of them.
Until she set fire to the house.
Both of them, or either of them, I'll be very upset.
And she didn't get in any trouble for that. She like literally lit his house on fire, and they were just it's Left Eye.
Everyone gets a pass.
Yeah, she got a pass.
You get one freebie.
Yeah.
No, she was amazing. Loved her.
Yeah.
She was cool.
And she was really polite. I mean, I loved her. I mean, she was never a bad person to us.
Remember, she was always the one who did the raps and the TLC songs. She'd be like, James, I hope this aspiration.
Yeah, no, she was so cool. I loved her.
Really?
She was amazing.
If you haven't noticed, Nate loved her.
Yes. No, I do.
Didn't she burn his house because she thought like he was cheating on her? Wasn't that
probably
that's what it was.
And then he wasn't, and he forgave her, and that's why there was no.
And how did she die?
Or maybe he did.
She died in a car accident.
Down in South America.
So that happened. I think they all happened around the same time. Was Left Eye, Aaliyah, and this is because I'm a millennial, but the Yellow Ranger. The Yellow Ranger and Left Eye, I believe, both died from a car accident with no seatbelt, and then Aaliyah died in a plane crash.
Because they had too much stuff in her.
Yeah, well,
it was all. I think it was all around that early, like right before 9/11 kind of thing.
And it was probably something to do with Diddy.
Before 9/11.
Yes, and then not only that, are we supposed to feel bad if you die in a car accident but you didn't have a seatbelt on?
I don't know.
I think you're kind of like, I don't feel bad anymore.
I only feel bad about that if it's a little kid. If it's a little kid. Yeah. Like if you're over 16 and you die and you didn't have a seatbelt, then I'm like, better. But if it's like like a little, because little kids have the tendency, they're like, what's this? And they'll undo it, and
child seat or something like that, and they die. You're like, oh, that's really sad. But if like you're 16, you're like driving.
Yeah,
idiot. Yeah. So Mr. Cam, we actually brought you on.
Kambs.
I said Kambs.
You said Cam, K-A-M-B. There's
golly, I'm going to leave. You guys take over. I've already messed this up.
Everybody's always like, Mr. Cam, Mr. Cam,
Mr. Cam. All right, Mr. Cam. Cam's like lambs.
Yes, lambs, but with a K.
Yes. We brought you on because you are like, according to your Instagram, you're a housing genius. And that's
I'm the mortgage rock god.
Yeah, I know.
According to my Instagram, yes.
Well, I know, but I mean, by watching you, you're a genius. You're a housing genius. But yeah, you are the mortgage rock god.
I'm prolific.
Yes. So we want to understand the housing market and like mortgages and what is going on. Like, because it's like all over, like every day you're hearing either like interest rates are going up, down. What causes that and why?
Okay.
Like, what decides the interest rate? Like I guess the Feds, but I mean, is it just willy-nilly or what?
A bond market. The Fed influences the bond market, right? And the Fed influences the economy, and the bond market really operates off a futures market of what the Fed's going to do. So what that means is the bond market's like, hey, this is what we think the Fed's going to do. This is what they've said. But in the background, there's still like a stock market going, you know what I mean? And I would say a stock market of the bond market. Okay. So like
Okay.
the bond market is like, I don't know if you guys know what a bond is, but like the simplest way to look at it is the 10-year treasury. That's what's called the benchmark coupon. So
Okay.
a bond is basically a debt that is, if you buy stock in Apple, that stock either goes up or down, right?
Mhm.
And if you buy Apple for $100 a share and it's 200, you made $100, right? But if you buy debt, let's say you're like, hey, you know what? The 10-year treasury right now, I think it ended on Friday at like 3.9%. Okay.
Mhm.
So the 10-year treasury is basically government debt for 10 years. And it's what they call the safe haven because the federal government has never defaulted on a debt. So if
Mhm.
you're a billionaire and you want to invest in the safest investment out there, it's there's multiple treasuries, but the 10-year is the one that they track, which is like basically you're going to loan the government money for 10 years. But there's 2-year treasuries, 5-year treasuries, 30-year treasuries, but it's the safe haven. So you have people that invest money into that. But what people don't realize is that this bond market, now it's what they call a fixed income asset. So what that means is that you can never make more than the note than the yield on the bond. So a stock you can make more, right? Apple can do better, and all of a sudden the price skyrockets, right? But
Mhm.
let's just say I go and invest in government debt at 4%. Okay, the most I can yield is 4% over 10 years,
That
if
sounds
that
like
makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So now in the background, there's what they call interest rate risk because as if I invest for 4%, there's still rates go up and down every day, right?
Yeah.
So let's just say I give the government 10, I loan the government 10 for 10 years at 4%. And let's just say I give them $100,000 just to keep it simple. And let's just say that now I can do, all I can really do is collect that money for 10 years at 4%. That's why it's a fixed income asset, right? But if let's just say interest rates, let's say 2 years down the road, I want my $100,000 back. So I have
Mhm.
to go to a secondary market now to sell that note, right? It's what provides liquidity.
so
But
you're
there's
gonna have
what
to pay interest on that, right?
well, no, I wouldn't pay interest on it because technically the government's paying interest to me on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? But I'm basically going to the secondary market and saying, hey, I've got this note for 4% that has X amount of dollars left on it. And will you buy it from me? Now, this is where it gets a little complicated. It's a little confusing, but since it's a bond market and it's a fixed income asset, interest rates go up or down. So let's just keep this simple though. Let's just say 2 years down the road, I say, hey, I want to sell this note that I have. I need liquidity. I want my $100,000 back. And let's just say interest rates are 8%.
Yeah.
Well, the secondary market's going to be like, yeah, we'll give you $50,000 for that $100,000 note. So I've lost 50% of my income or 50% of my initial investment. Why? Because the investors are like, why would we give you $100,000 at 4% when we can go get $100,000 at 8% today?
Mhm.
So they discount it, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, that's basically what controls interest rates, right? Like when
Mhm.
people are buying bonds, and it's inverse, right?
It almost
So
sounds like savings bonds with real estate.
it's exactly it's a bond, right? Savings and loan crisis. But so and there's an inverse relationship, right? So since there is a secondary market for bonds, right? Like how do you price like, and I did it simple for you guys just to explain it, but like let's just say that interest rates I sign I invest in government bonds at 4%, and then the interest rate goes up to 4.25. I'm going to lose a little bit of money if I try to sell that. Now, obviously, I can sit and collect my 4%, right? But if I try to get out of that, and that's why you see like the longer the term, the
Mhm.
higher the typically, right? Now that's if you look at what's been happening is the Fed can control what they control is the shortest interest, the shortest duration interest rate. Like they control the rate, the overnight lending rate to banks,
Okay,
but
let
that
me ask you
basically
something.
funnels down. Mhm.
So the president, who is able to elect the person in charge of the Federal Reserve, he has a lot of say in what is going to happen with the housing market. Is that correct?
The president of the United States.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
Um,
there's the person that runs the Fed, right?
No, I would say that the president. I mean, I don't know if
I'm not 100% sure on the whole,
So,
structure of everything. So
yeah. So the Fed. I mean, it's. I think if I'm not, and I'm a little ignorant on this, but I think that a president can appoint a Federal Reserve,
okay.
but I think it's like after his term is up type thing. It's not like they don't get to just do it willy nilly whenever they want.
Okay.
But technically, the whole reason that the Fed was created was exactly to fight against what you're saying, where politicians control the money supply. So they're supposed to be interdependent, right?
Like that's why I was asking about it.
Yeah, they're supposed to be totally interdependent. Now, Trump, back in 2019, when he said, the Fed started raising rates in 2019 before the pandemic, and it was because rates had been so low for so long that the market was just like, dude, are you ever? And so when they started raising them, I don't know if you remember, Trump came out and was like, why is the Fed raising rates when he was president? Right. And that's unprecedented. Like, that's a big no-no. That's why everybody was like, what is he doing? Because like the president is never supposed to like.
Yeah, no, that's why I was asking, because I remember interjecting himself to the whole argument about the whole.
Yeah, and that like, call it whatever you want, but ultimately most presidents are like, nope, that's a big no-no. You're not supposed to do that. The money, they're not supposed to influence like the money supply, because like, if politicians were influencing the money supply, what every nation where that doesn't have a Federal Reserve, the way it was taught to me in economics class, is like they have, like when the politicians run the money supply, it's print. And print is high inflation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the worst thing you could possibly do to try to fight, inflation.
Yeah, no, you got to raise.
Remember all that happening back in the, Trump administration, and I was like, why is he saying all this? And people are
he's not supposed to, right? That's kind of that's why people love Trump, right? They're like, oh my gosh, he's tough as nails. He says what you know what I mean. He's not like, you're not supposed to do that. And you know what? I do think, to his credit, they actually listened. Do you know what I mean?
They actually did. You're 100% correct.
Which again, they're not supposed to. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, he went out and he was like, "Yeah, don't increase." They're like, "Oh, okay, we're not going to increase the."
Well, they did once, and then the pandemic started happening.
That screwed everything up.
Yeah, but again, just to go back to the original question, what influences rates is a bond market, and the bond market is exactly like a stock market, only since it's debt, people don't. It's hard. It's a little bit harder to grasp, because it's easy to look at a stock and say, oh, I bought Apple at 100 and now it's 200. I've made $100, or I bought Apple at 100 and now it's 50. I lost $50. Because there's an inverse relationship, because it's a fixed income asset, right? So how do you value something that can only have a certain a fixed amount of return, right?
Yeah.
And the way they do that is, like I said, it's buyer. Since there is a secondary market on bonds, right? It's based on what the current interest rate is, and then they discount. Like if you come into the market and you're like, hey, I bought a 30-year note, and nobody holds a note for 30 years.
Right.
They in theory they do, but like it gets sold thousands of times on a secondary market, which is like a stock market.
Yeah.
And I would just say the biggest thing is that there's an inverse relationship. So when bonds are going up, the price of bonds are going up, the interest rates are going down. Okay. And when the price of bonds is going down, interest rates are going up.
Yeah.
So
gotcha.
in basically, and here's an easy way to kind of look at it. Typically, when the economy is doing bad, people are fearful, bonds go up, right? Because people are like, oh my God, I want to get my money out of the stock market. It's, I want to get into a fixed income asset, right? I want to get somewhere where I know that I can park $1 million and I know I'm going to get 5% no matter what. And that's typical of like a recessionary times. And then what you've seen these last 3 years is that obviously the market's doing really well, but then inflation skyrocketed. So now you have the Fed being like, I'm going to raise the shortest term interest rate I have, which is the Fed funds rate, in an effort to stage off inflation. And then once they started doing that, it was number one for inflation, but then it's also like the economy is usually, if the economy is doing really well, interest rates go up, right? So you had basically the Fed was like, hey, the economy is doing pretty well after COVID, but we had like a recession during COVID. They pumped a ton of money into. Yep, go ahead.
No,
Okay. Yeah, so they pumped a ton of money into the economy during COVID, and they didn't. And if you remember, like, we didn't really have bad inflation for like 20 years. They were trying to create inflation and they couldn't, but they literally printed so much money in response of COVID that the only thing that could happen is inflation. Yeah. And then the Fed basically, I don't know if you remember the word transitory, but they were like, oh no, it's transitory. Like and that's when they should have been raising rates, and they didn't. And they were like, call it 6 months late to the party. So then they had to raise rates to cool down inflation. And then usually when they do that, the market cools and you may experience a recession, and you may see the stock market turn. But what's been unprecedented is the stock market's been on fire, right? So you have like inflation, subsiding, coming down dramatically, but the stock market is I attribute it to AI. AI is like kind of like the internet of 1999. If you guys remember, like, you remember 1999, it was like the internet craze and the .com bubble, yep. And then of course it came crashing down.
That was when adjustable rate mortgages were real popular.
Yeah. Well, then that's because
how did that come about? I mean,
well, you'll start to see that right now. Right now, ARMs aren't really advantageous, because what has the Fed done? The Fed has raised the short-term interest rate so high that, like, it doesn't benefit a bank to do a 5-year ARM, because they're like, I'm already paying 5.75 on the overnight lending rate.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't understand how that became a thing back in the 90s.
Well, no, because what happens is when, like, and I think when you can talk about it, is like, this will probably really confuse you guys, but I don't know if you've ever heard of an inverted yield curve.
Yes.
Okay, so an inverted yield curve is basically, like I said, if you're going to loan the government money for 10 years, you should get a higher return than if you borrow the money for 2 years.
Right.
But an inverted yield curve is when that is not the case. So if you look at the last 2 years, when the Fed raised short-term interest rates so high, the 2-year was paying more than the 10-year. So you basically got a higher rate of return giving the government your money for a shorter period of time than you did for a 10-year.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then obviously they do that purposefully to cool down the economy. So when you see the 2-year, and this was Fed induced, but you can also have, like, because the Fed can raise the interest rates, but you can also have, like, where, because the treasuries are a global stock market, if you will, like the whole world is investing in these. So the Fed can only do so much, right? Like they're a powerhouse, but ultimately, if the Fed says they're going to raise short-term interest rates, and the whole market is like, there's something, regardless of what the Fed has, the short-term interest rates, like, let's say World War III starts tomorrow, then you would have a big influx or some economic calamity. You would have a huge influx into the bond market, and that would probably drive the 2-year and the 10-year down, even though the Fed has like has the short-term rate higher. But yeah, it's basically what the Fed does, right? And what you've seen now is I think we're back to an inverted yield curve right now. But I don't know if you guys saw the headlines a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago now at this time. They were talking about how the yield curve had finally uninverted, where it was like, oh, the 10-year is paying more than the 2-year treasury.
But it just kind of plateaued. Yeah,
but what's hilarious is, like, I was telling somebody, so what do they say? They say, oh, whenever the yield curve inverts, it's a sign of a recession. A recession is coming, right? Because what the notion is that people are more, if you think about it, there's two ways. Like, number one, the Fed can raise short-term interest rates to get the 2-year higher, or you can have investors go and be like, I'm going to go and buy 10-year notes, right? Or 10-year treasuries. And what happens is as they buy 10-year treasuries, the price goes up because it's like a stock, right? When more people are buying Apple, the price goes up. So if they buy these 10 years, the yield goes down because there's an inverse relationship, right? So now all of a sudden the 10 years not 4, it's 3.5. But the notion is that they basically are like, oh, these investors are like, we drove so much money into the 10-year bond that it's below the 2-year. So it means that investors are more secure with what's investing for 10 years than 2. So they're like, we don't know what the hell's going to happen in the next 2 years.
Now, I have to ask you one question, and you don't have to answer. All right.
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Who do you think is going to be the better president coming up in this election for the housing market?
Yeah, I don't care. You want to know what we need? You want to know what we need?
I love
yes. Tell me what we need.
What we need. I watch it, and I recommend this to everybody. I'm like an old fart and a nerd.
No,
but,
you're great.
There's
absolutely 100% fabulous, man.
Thank you. So no, but there's a thing called it's on CNBC. It's called Squawk Box. It's every morning, right? And they had the guy or Squawk on the Street, I think but they had a guy, and I agree with them. He's like, I want a divided House and Senate. He's like, because ultimately, if there's a divided House and Senate, all this crazy shit isn't going to pass, right? Both sides have insane things, right? Yes. Trump, I want tariffs across the board. Kamala, I'm going to tax unrealized gains. None of that.
That is the worst thing you could possibly do for anybody.
Yeah,
that's
ultimately
the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
None of that stuff is going to go through.
No.
If there's a divided House and Senate, do you know what I mean? So he's like, I was like, it's so true. So I mean, I think what is good for just the nation in general is that who cares who gets president? Like they don't really. I think that
you were saying is America has division and needs to keep it.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, that's what makes us we compromise and there's checks and balances.
We try to.
But like checks and balances are huge. So.
A lot of people get bullied into doing something they don't want, but I agree with you 100%. I think that a divided Congress, especially when it comes to finances or real estate and something like that, you are absolutely right. Because
and we just have
taxes on unrealized gains is the stupidest thing you could do.
They both have, and I mean, like, regardless of your political
affiliation,
like when you say out loud, we're just going to put 20% tariffs on everything.
Yeah, like
that's just as asinine. You're like, okay, so what if it's a product? 100%. What if it's a product we're trying to compete with China on? We're gonna tariff them. We're gonna be like, you know what I mean? Like it's so. Again, I think in this world, this polarizing world we have, the only thing that keeps these, because they're both. You could argue they're both have radical ideas, and the only thing that can stop that is, like we said, the divided House and Senate.
No, and you're right, 100%. But the thing that gets me, and this is kind of off topic, but like China controls about 98% of all the world's precious metals, which are very invaluable for building like electrical vehicles and computers and things like that. I don't understand why we don't take that over. And I don't know.
What do you mean? Like take over?
Well, we just discovered a cache in America, and we're going to have to go through all these different regulations and different
where's the cache
and things like that. Just to be able to get these to compete with China. We don't need China to be and not only that, but China also makes about 98% of our prescription drugs. Which I don't understand. I mean, we need to be making them here. So, you
could probably source that to just the pharma market in general, the way they operate. It's just pure profit practically, at least here.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, we need to start focusing more on our own.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this like, I think like America is like I want manufacturing. And then I'm like, okay, well, your shirt's $75. And then people are like, I don't want to pay $75 for my t-shirt. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Go to Mexico and
Yeah,
pay
exactly.
cents on the dollar, yeah, whatever.
So I want to get back to the housing. I've bought houses now, but there are people who the first time they're trying to buy a house, it's confusing as crap. Like what you need and what do you like when you're dealing with somebody and it's like their first time out there? What do you suggest them to get ready to have, and like what should they be looking for? Because like you because what I've heard about you from others is you're very honest about, but I'm sure there's people out there that are a little bit more shady who may be giving them advice that may not be as beneficial to them in the long run. Where like we were saying, like the arms and stuff back in the day, or like when I first bought my house, someone was trying to push an arm on me, and I was like, I don't like the sound of that, and so I ended up going with a fixed, and so, but like what are some things people should look out for and to like so that they don't get screwed, because we don't know how the housing market, like you said, is going to be in the next 2
it's a
years.
really confusing market. I mean, out of everything that you have to deal with, housing market tends to be the most confusing thing that people have to deal with. And I think it also allows them to be the most manipulated.
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. Number one, I would say for the average person like you and my house is not an investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hope
Really?
it goes up. I hope
Yeah.
it goes up, right? Nobody wants to buy something that goes down in value. But my investments are in my 401k and like real estate. I'm not a real estate investor. Now, there are real estate investors out there. I am not one. I have a primary home. Okay. I'm not going to try to buy new investment properties and flip them, etc. So for the average Joe, I would say the biggest thing is that the best objective advice out there is that you shouldn't be buying unless you're willing and ready to hold for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like anything. If like Nvidia stock, I was looking at that, and earnings came out a couple months ago or about a month ago, and they shattered earnings, and the stock plummeted. And the point is that Nvidia over the next 5-10 years is going to be a gold mine, but over the next 6 months, who knows, right? You could lose your shirt in 6 months on Nvidia, right? The market turns, all of a sudden AI has a bad tone. Now, over 10-20 years, Nvidia is a great buy, but same thing with housing. I don't know. And then not only that, when you buy a home, people don't realize that, if you buy a $400,000 home and you put 5% down, that's $20,000. And 2 years down the road, you want to sell your $40,000 or your $400,000 home.
You're going to be paying more than what you paid for it.
Well, yeah, you're gonna exactly like, but let's just say 8%, right? Is your closing costs after you pay you're gonna have to pay a realtor 5%, maybe even 6% for. Well, you're gonna have to. Who knows with this new law that came out, but usually you're going to pay 3% to a buyer's agent, 2 to 3% to a buyer's agent, 2 to 3% to your agent as a seller. So let's just say that's 5% average. You're going to have another 3% in closing costs. So if you take 8% of 400, that's $36,000 if I'm doing the math correctly. That means that you need to sell for 36,000 to even break even on the 400.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense, because you're now if you sold for 400, people think like, oh, I'm fine. I don't know anything, right? I bought it for 400. I sold it for 400. No, you got to pay closing costs and realtor fees. So if your house isn't 436, then that means you bought it for 400. You're selling it for
500.
Under. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but you're a $36,000 loss on a $400,000 home. Now,
how do you feel about these people that are doing all these flips?
I think that I'm bullish on housing in general, right? Like when you look at what's going on, especially like I was actually I live in Chicago, and I was going to open houses yesterday, and I live in like I would say a more posh neighborhood in Chicago.
Okay.
And I go like 3 miles west, and there's a $600,000 home that this builder bought and rehabbed, and it's like 2 miles down the road here, $1.2 million.
Wow.
So and my point is there's just so little housing,
Okay,
especially in Chicago, that like it's going to continue to perform well.
That you lived in Chicago, how do you feel about the taxes and the laws and the real estate rules?
I love the taxes. I want more. I'm like, can you guys raise my taxes?
Are you kidding
No,
me?
no.
God, you are not a Trump supporter. I can tell.
No,
I'm kidding.
I'm joking. Like, no, nobody. Everybody, like, the taxes suck here.
Yeah, no, that was my main.
Yeah,
point
I'd say the taxes suck here. I grew up here, right? But I definitely.
No, I think that's great.
I got my kids in school here. I'm stuck is a good way to put it. Like, I don't have a choice.
No, but the town, fucking grab it.
Great town,
love it.
Great town, but it's expensive, and it's not like I feel like I think you can question the value. But again, this is like the aha I had yesterday, is that I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, everything's a trade off, right? But 2 miles down the road, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is like probably 3 times the house I have.
Mm-hmm.
For the same
so
price.
You got like heaven on one side.
Yeah, exactly. But what does that come with, right? You're like, oh, so you get this $1.2 million house, or the $1.2 million house here is only 600,000, 2.5 miles west.
Wow.
That comes with a much worse neighborhood.
Yes.
And really bad schools.
Yeah. Well,
you know what I mean? So
schools have so much to do with the real estate. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. And like the school I live in, we have in Chicago's weird because like where I live, the public school is great. Where that house was, terrible.
Not so good. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's like it's really unfair, right? When you're like, okay, like why is one neighborhood?
No, I agree with you.
And then we're talking publicly funded things, right? Like how is this? Mm-hmm. But I will say, like the place I go to is more affluent, so they have this place they have called Friends of Pulaski, and I think they bring in like $300,000 a year just in donations.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like the rich get richer type thing, right? So you have basically a double effect, right? Like these schools perform better on their tests. They fund them more.
If schools perform better, they're going to be pulling in the one of them. So
yeah, exactly. They perform better, but it is a little bit like you could argue it's systemic poverty. Yeah. A little bit, because you're like, okay, so if you're from a bad neighborhood,
you're going to be
you're
not going to perform well.
Yeah, you're not going to perform well, which means you're never going to get the money, which means you're never going to. But if you, and that's a good point, is that you want to know what changes it is real estate, because guess what's happening now? You have I was talking to the realtor at this West Side Chicago thing, and she's like, yeah, people don't buy for more than 600 here, and it's because that's the ceiling of affluent people moving into that neighborhood. They're like, I'm not going to pay more than 600. I'll just go to Lincoln Park and get, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll go live in the nice neighborhood. So as real estate starts to get more expensive in these nicer neighborhoods, and people start to slowly move out of the nicer ones that are a little bit on the edge of town. I mean, you look at where I lived 20 years ago. This was a quote bad neighborhood.
Really? Oh wow.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I live on Bucktown.
So do you think that like busing or being able to move from one school district to another is helping?
Well, I mean, you can't really like in Chicago. Like
I know Illinois is I said Illinois. I want to kick myself.
Yeah,
Illinois.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a little like Chicago's weird because the way it works here is you have to if somebody wanted to go to the school here where my kids go, they couldn't just move in.
Okay.
To get, you know what I mean? They would have to, especially if they're from Chicago, I think how it works. So yeah, I think if you just tried to be like, oh, I'm just going to move in. There's a time you can't just move in and go to this school. But then to take it a step further, the only way to go to that school is if you live in this neighborhood.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? And they do have you can go on the wait list, and there's certain ways to get into the Pulaski school where my kids go. but it's like either you've lived here for a while and that's why you go, or you waited on a waiting list, or you are. They definitely have they purposefully will allow less affluent kids from other neighborhoods to come here, but you have to be like a special case like that to get in. You can't just move into the neighborhood overnight and get into the school.
No, that makes sense.
The lotto system.
Yeah, it really is. And then what's even crazier is my daughter. I've got an 8-year-old daughter, or an 8th grade daughter that she just came back from the library. She's studying. She's on Wednesday. She's taking her high school enrollment exam. So don't get.
They have high school enrollment.
Yeah, it's selective enrollment here.
All right.
So if you want to get into one of the nicer high schools, because all the other high schools are really bad here. So if you want to get into a nicer high school in Chicago, you have to test in.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
You don't, which when I first moved here, I was like, this is bullshit, right? I went to what is this? But then
it doesn't matter what sort of financial background you come from. If you're smart, you can go in. If you pass.
Yeah. If you get into, correct. Now, not necessarily. If anything, it skews the opposite way. So you would think that if I make a lot of money, I can get into these schools, right?
All right.
But the way they do it, my daughter goes to I think it's tier 4. So tier 4 is the highest tier, meaning the average median income is the highest in your district.
All
so
right.
it's harder for my daughter to get into a great school than it is for somebody from a tier 1. So tier 1, to say this out loud, hypothetically, my daughter can have better grades, better test score, better extracurricular activities, and still not get in because somebody else is in a tier 1 school. But they also then it's oh, well, if you can't get in, then the notion is that, oh, you should be able to afford to send them to a private school. Which again, that's not obviously necessarily the case, but it's crazy.
I don't know if I like that or not. I'm kind of torn.
The take is what I just said, but you want to know what the give is that I thought was I was talking to a teacher that works at my kid's school, and I was because it's 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and I was I bet all the boys are just really misbehaved. Because that's how I was in that when I'm 47, so I remember we were just insane, right? Yes, and she's like, no, she's like, they're all really worried and testing to get into high school, and I'm like, that probably would have been good for me at that age.
Well, you know what I mean? I think I was telling Ken, if they had the same school offered for me when we were in high school, because Ken and I graduated the same year. If I was able to go to a career center that had the same classes offered now that they did then, when we were in school, all it was automotive, woodworking, and
for sure,
or something, something like that. Now they've got cybersecurity, they've got computer, tech stuff. I have no idea because I haven't been in high school for over 30.
Yeah, no, for sure. But it was very limited for trades or anything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now they have more trade classes. I think trade school is more, I think it's more, it has more opportunities than a regular high school and a diploma. I think like I said, my friend Misty, her oldest son Elijah, he studied cybersecurity, and he got an intern job starting at $60,000 a year, which is more than what I make, a year. I'm very jealous, but if that was available to me, I would have taken that over a regular high school diploma. And I think it's fantastic that they're offering these jobs. I think they need to offer more of these jobs, more careers, and let people make their decisions.
I mean, you look at the antithesis, right? I was a terrible student in middle school. Yeah. I had no accountability to getting into a high school.
Right.
They're oh, you go to the same high school as everybody else. I just go and distract the class because that's what I do. And then they have to kind of parse everybody into like, oh, these are the smart kids. These are the I shouldn't say smart, but these are the ones who are going to go to college. These are the ones who are going to go to work, right? They have to like weed everybody out. Where like Chicago's more like, no, if you're not like a smart kid, you're not going to be hanging out with all the other smart kids.
That is so
And
depressing.
yeah, it's depressing, isn't it? Because like,
It really is.
thank God we were born when we were born. Because I would be
God, the
totally,
70s were
I would be totally
Yeah.
cameras
You'd be-
everywhere taping what I'm doing.
You'd be in the red reading group.
Yes. Yeah. But I was actually pretty smart. I just hated when I got into college, I was like, oh wow, I actually like school.
Yeah,
But
well,
I
I
didn't.
went to college and I realized I like drinking, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I like that too. I went to Western Illinois University, and that's like all. I remember when Western Illinois University is 4 hours south. It's in Macomb, Illinois. So
Yeah,
there's like literally nothing to do but get wasted, right? It's this huge school, and I remember my first year, I was like, oh my god, this is so amazing. I love Western Illinois University, and so I come home and I've got friends who are still living at home, and I'm like, you guys have to come to Western. It's the best ever, right? And they're like, okay, we're gonna go to Western. So they go to Western, and they're like, there's really nothing to do to get wasted. And I'm like, what's the problem? I'm like, what? Isn't that what we do? They're like, that's all there is, though. They're like, there's no movies, there's no mall. I'm like,
I'll tell you what. I've got to tell you, I lived in South Bend for about 4 years, 3 years before I was driving the truck. I lived there, and okay, Notre Dame is the college town in South Bend. Obviously,
yeah.
It's a Catholic college.
Yeah,
I was expecting
so they're drinkers.
Bars.
Yeah.
There was one bar. It was called the Linebacker Club. That was the only bar that they had there. I'm like, you guys aren't real Catholics. I'm sorry.
So they're Christian Catholics? What?
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I know.
Do those exist?
I was like, oh my God, you only have one bar and you claim to be a Catholic college. Not possible.
Yeah,
Not
I grew up Catholic, and
I did too.
My mom.
You know what I'm talking about.
My mom's maiden name was Kelly, and her mom had 10 kids. My grandma.
Holy crap!
So, yeah, total like. And I was talking to one of the
she's
my
not
mom's,
Mormon.
yeah, I was talking to my mom's I guess she'd be my great aunt or something, but she was saying that like she's like, no, she's like, the Catholic Church there was like, if you were not having kids, they were like, what's going on?
Really?
Like,
wow.
Yeah, they were up in your, you know what? It's like they were like, you're supposed to be having kids. That's what you do. You better not be on birth control. And what's crazy is they're poor as dirt. So I'm like, so you guys are poor. You're just cranking out kids. Like
that's what they expected. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, it's just like, so it's
right.
Definitely moronic. You know what I mean? You're like, times are bad. Let's have a kid.
I agree 100% with that.
Well, it's a very common thing with like the agrarian, which, back that in that time, the agrarian culture, the farming, you have to have a bunch of kids. And, also like kids would just die more often.
Yeah, no, that's true too. I had a friend that I went to school with that was Catholic, and his parents had, like you said, 10 kids. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, at least if you're Amish though, you're like, dude, you're going on the farm. Like you're in like, you know what I mean? But like with that, you're like, it's just expensive. You know what I mean? You're like, I'm just tacking on expenses every time you have a kid, right?
When I went up to South Bend, I was really expecting something completely different, and it changed my whole perspective of the Catholic stereotype, because there were no bars, just the one. And it was nice because, you could go there, and during the USC Notre Dame game, you'd see like Bruce Willis, Demi Moore, Jessica Simpson, Nick Lachey. I'm dating myself right now. So, I mean, it was kind of cool, but at the same time, I mean, it was like this the whole time you were there. You couldn't move.
Yeah, you can't drink in the games, can you?
Yeah, no, I
don't think so.
Someplace to having a good time, relaxing, and just unwinding. And yeah, when karaoke came out, I was really happy about that. But now I just, enjoy a nice sports bar. Watch a football game, talk with friends, have a good time. But yeah, South Bend. I don't want to disparage them because, like I said, their tailgates were fantastic. They were absolutely amazing. There was a family that I worked with, or that I hung out with. They were with like 7 or 8 different people. They all brought in turkey deep fryers one year, and or one week, and we had like 12 deep fried turkeys. Have you ever had deep fried turkey?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, they're amazing. And then they also set up tables. They had like portable bars, and they had like, I think my favorite drink was a hot chocolate with a little bit of Dr. McGillicuddy's vanilla schnapps mixed in. It was absolutely incredible. But yeah, no.
You guys ever hear this joke? What's the best thing that ever happened to Indiana?
Me
What?
moving out?
Chicago.
That, yeah. I get it.
Nice.
Yeah, you go to Indiana, you get across the border, you're like,
Yeah.
I'm not at home anymore.
Yeah.
Indiana, I lived there for what was it, Ken? What, 15, 17
Yeah.
years?
You're there a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's funny because in Chicago, people are like, it's like, where do you go to live cheap? And there for a while, I was like, oh, Milwaukee, right? Because Milwaukee is just like, when you think about it, you're like, it's on a lake. It's beautiful. They got a sports
really
team. They got a baseball team, and you can get a lot more for a lot less in Milwaukee. But if you really
fantastic,
but if you really want to save money, you go to Indiana.
Yeah,
because the taxes are just so cheap, and that's where you get both. Wisconsin's not as cheap as Illinois, or not as expensive as Illinois, but Indiana taxes are just so cheap.
But Milwaukee does have the world record for the most bars on one block. So
yeah, and Wisconsin has just such great food, man.
Yes,
it's all terrible for you, but it's so good. And I love that they give you
driving up to Oshkosh to watch the international aviation, the experimental aviation, air show they have up there. Driving up there, all I saw was houses of cheese or cheese houses.
Yeah.
I was like, what do they do during the wintertime besides eat cheese and watch porn? I mean, it makes
drink beer. They drink beer.
And drink beer, yeah. But I mean, like there was like a porn shop, a cheese house, a porn shop, a cheese house. I was like, this is the most.
That is Wisconsin, man. Oh, you know what else they do? What else they do is they do slots.
Oh,
the video gaming slots. Yeah, like those are everywhere. Yeah, every place you go has a slot room, right? So it's like, but I love Wisconsin. I feel like as soon as I get over the border, my anxiety just like melts away.
Yeah,
like it's just such a they're just the nicest people. Like where Chicago is more like Chicago. You're like, don't make eye contact with anybody.
You're absolutely correct. Wisconsin people are just like so chill.
Wisconsin people will wave you down. They'll wave you down from like the other side of the road and be like, no, and you're like, what? They're like, I just wanted to say hi. You're like, okay.
Yeah, they're like Canadians. They're
yes, they really are. So much to where you're like, what's the ulterior motive?
And I don't know, man. I watched Fargo too much to just trust them completely.
Yeah, don't watch Fargo.
Yeah, well, that's Minnesota, isn't it?
That's
Minnesota. I think it's North Dakota, isn't it?
Fargo, the show is like spread out a little bit. It's just called Fargo.
Yeah. It's north. It's up north.
It's those northern folks.
It was South Dakota. Okay.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Don't you say?
Funny. He's kind of funny looking. Remember for Steve Buscemi, they always are like, I don't know. One guy smoked. He smoked a lot, but I don't know if I'm saying that just because he smoked, or he looked like the Marble Man just because he smoked a lot. He's just kind of funny looking. Oh yeah, I love who's the guy? William H. Macy, isn't that the actor?
Oh yeah, the guy from
from Shameless, right? I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. The heck do you mean? That movie's amazing.
That guy.
I heard the series. I love that too.
It's good. Yeah, I'm a little behind. It's like an anthology series, so every season's like completely different. But yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, my business partner was telling me that I got to watch it. He's like, it's so good.
Nice.
But
now, like we've had you here an hour now, and it's like flown by like crazy. But I
Wow.
want to know like closing thought, and I also want you to share how people can check you out on Instagram
Sure.
and wherever else you want them to know.
Yep.
Closing thought: what should people be looking for in the market now? Like, if like what's going on, what should be looking for? Is there anything you think we should be aware of that maybe people don't realize is going on?
Something that might come up in the near
Yeah,
future.
I would just say that the if you look at the media has just been so negative on housing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? They've been negative on housing from 2020, and like and actually before that. And what has it done? It's just refuted them over and over again. So what I tell people is that the you're if you want to wait to buy, it's just going to cost you more and more. Marry the home, date the rate. Now, when I say that, like you should still be you have to buy something you can afford.
Right.
Okay, if you can't afford it, then you can't buy, and that's just the harsh reality. But what I tell people like, what is the payment that you're comfortable with?
Mm-hmm.
And I can work that backwards, and then I can basically say, hey, if you're comfortable with a $3,000 payment, that's a $350,000 home today. So let's go look at $350,000 homes. We can get you set up with a realtor and decide whether or not you like them.
See, this is what bothers me. When Ken and I were kids, my parents bought our first house, which was just a 60-foot, wide ranch house, I guess, for $68,000. Sold it for like 80, or no, I think it was 46. They sold it for 86. They put a bid on a house that was estimated for 150,000. They put it in for 112, and they got accepted because it's been on the market for a while. People can't afford these $1 million homes that are like the size of like a cubic's apartment. How are people still affording houses right now?
What do they say? It's a good. I'm
I mean,
joking
I'm
a
not
little
trying
bit.
to put you on the spot
No,
or
no,
anything
no.
like that, because you've
I'm
been
joking.
fantastic.
I'm joking a little bit here, but
Yeah,
it's not that you. It's not that it's too expensive. It's that you can't afford it.
exactly.
You know
So
what I'm saying? So there
where
are
do
people that can
I mean,
afford it,
is it
right?
just
Yeah.
Obviously,
I mean,
there are people who can afford it, right? But now if you look though, like what's struggling the most in this market really is, and there's a little bit of irony here, but what's struggling the most in this market is those higher priced homes, right? If you're a $1 million home, interest rates at 7% is a lot more hard than interest rates at 5%. Where
right.
if you're buying a $400,000 home, the difference between 3 and 5 or 5 and 7, yeah, it sucks. Nobody wants to pay more, but you can still swing it. You see what like where like 5 and 7 on a $1.5 million homes, $5,000 more a month.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would say that ultimately it is what it is, and if you can afford to buy right now, then you're just gonna pay more
Okay. Now,
over if you don't buy, right? Like you're trying to
Mhm.
time the market, trying to say that you're gonna wait for housing to crash is asinine, and
right.
just for the simple fact that there's just not enough homes. When the market crashed in 2008, there were 4 million homes on the market.
Wow.
Right now, I don't know exactly. There's under 1.5 million, I'm pretty sure, right now on the market right now, and our population is doubled.
Yeah.
So those
Well,
that are waiting for a crash, just in general, now there are pockets like you look at like Austin overbuilt, and they're starting to experience some trouble. Florida's getting hit hard now because of obviously the hurricanes and insurance costs, and but
sure.
I think just in general, like where you guys live, like would you say there's a housing shortage where you guys live?
No, not
Yeah,
where I'm at.
I
there's
live
definitely
in
an influx in the
California, so
price
yes.
of the market in the Midwest.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
market. Yeah, exactly. But even in California, it's for houses that are priced right, in generally speaking, they're flying off the shelf.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue to be that way because what's going to happen is rates are going to come down, maybe not in a straight line, but when rates do come down, you're going to have the exact same thing that happened in COVID, where there's no inventory and there's an influx of buyers and prices went up.
We probably don't have enough time to really get into it, but one of the things that I'm very interested in like a worrisome kind of way though is the firms that are buying up houses, because that's competition with just people that want to buy homes, because they have unlimited money and they can outbid anybody if they want the property. And so like that keeps prices high as well, in addition to the lack of homes.
Yeah, no, and there's also this stuff like I'm sure you've heard that like something like 40% of investment properties are owned by big corporations or hedge funds, and then when the market starts to crash and they unload their books, there's going to be a housing crash because they're gonna basically flood the market. But I've heard I've heard that even if they did, even if BlackRock or all these hedge funds said, "Hey, we're putting our whole portfolio on the market," they're just going to get gobbled up.
Well, no, that I mean, people have to be buying these things. I mean, if they're like, "Hey, we're buying up all these properties, you got to buy it at this price," and people are like, "Yeah, no," and then they're stuck with it. Prices are going to go down.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the purported reasons, like BlackRock or whatever subsidiary they're funneling this through, is buying the homes though is like primarily to make them rentals. So they are looking at them as a long-term thing, rather like if they're offloading them, that's like we got to get quick cash, but they don't really need to get quick cash because they're BlackRock. But so like I think that the likelihood of them just getting rid of everything is slim to none. I think,
and even if they did, I from what I've understood, it would be a drop in the bucket. They'd be gobbled up. So yeah, I think for anybody who's again, and I'm conservative when it comes to investing. So I'm a big like, hey, plan for the worst and hope for the best. Okay, so planning for the worst is that I plan to keep this home for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right. Or know that I have to rent it out or whatever if I decide I want to move. Because it's much more risky to buy a home that you need to sell in 3 years than it is to buy a home that you need to sell in 10. In 10 years, you should be able to weather the storm. And if you determine that, hey, you are willing to stay put for 10 years, number one, number two, what's the payment you're comfortable with?
Well,
and number three, what kind of homes does that yield, right?
Yeah,
like, don't look at the rate, don't look at because it's like, ultimately it's going to come down to what you can afford to pay monthly. And I think it's a great investment if over the next 10 years, if you can afford it.
If it's done right. I mean, like if you buy something, you need a new roof, you need a new water heater, you need new HVAC. I mean, that's the only difference between owning and renting.
No, I think also too, like I did a video on this, like where like if you remember, like right after the pandemic, the media, if you listen to them, they had everybody believing that you couldn't buy a car.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's just no cars, right?
Yeah.
I bought a car. You could buy a car. You could buy a car, right? Like it was like, there was limited inventory, but you could buy a car. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with housing, right? Like people listen to the media, they're like, oh my God, it's so expensive. I'm not even going to look. I don't even know. And then when they actually do look, and then when they actually do get in the market, they're like, okay, it took me maybe 5 or 6 months to find a home.
Yeah.
But I found one and I bought one. So I would just say, don't believe the hype. Talk to a professional. They can get a hold of me. The best way to get a hold of me, I'm a mortgage_rock_god on Instagram. My name is John Kambs. It's like lambs, but with a K. And you can always email me at KJG Kelly. K is in Kambs, J is in Jennings, G is in group at rate.com. And we'd be happy to help you. But I would say talk to a professional. And don't do anything that you're not comfortable with as far as payments. And it's a long-term investment, right? I said it's not an investment, but if it is an investment, it's a long-term investment. It's not a like, oh, I'm going to get in and sell it. Now, again, planning for the best, worst, and hoping for the best. If you plan for the worst and the market tanks and you're stuck in your home, or I mean, heck, you look at people now, who would have thought that you'd be stuck in your home because you've got a really low rate?
Yeah.
And people are, right? Like, oh, I can't do anything. Prices went up. I couldn't afford it now. So Yeah, but if you get stuck in the home, but you're like, oh, well, I plan to live here for 10 years anyway, then it's no big deal. But if you now the opposite is like, you buy and 3 years from now you're like, oh wow, it was like in 2020 and real estate's a lot more, and I sold that house, got another one upgraded, and life is grand, right? That's hoping for the best. If the best happens, great, but plan for the worst. But yeah, that's what the advice I would give to people. And buying a home, I would say too, is really not that hard. It's a lot easier than people think as far as qualifying goes. You just need to have somebody that you know and trust. And I do think that what happens in finance is it's a little bit of like the Wizard of Oz, when they pull the curtain back and they're like, it's just a human. And I think in finance that happens a lot, where it's like, oh, like, I can't tell you what it is because I need you to do this list of tasks, like where you're like no, like just talk to a real professional. Something like I could, on the back of a napkin, if you have good enough numbers, like I could tell you exactly what you qualify for. I don't need to, like, you don't need to go jump through hoops to do it. But a lot of this is really like, what car dealerships, right? Get them in the door, keep them in the dealership, wear them down. 5 hours into it, they're like, just give me the car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that goes on a lot in finance, like, unfortunately, where it's like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I don't know, I can't tell you. You need to jump through these 5 hoops before anybody can tell you anything.
It's like,
and then
where they're like,
yeah, exactly.
Pass it before we know what's in it.
Yeah, exactly. And then by the time by the time you get somebody a ream of paperwork, they're like, I don't want to ever do that again. I'm just going to use John, or I'm going to use that person I went with. But it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all marketing. It's all, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's what I would say. Talk to a professional. We'd be happy to help you. But look at it from your own perspective, and look at it from like, what are your real plans? Do you have a family, and you're like, oh, I've got kids, and I know that I got to be in elementary and high school for the next 10 years, then yeah, you should buy. Are you single and think you might want to move to California in 2 years? Then no, you shouldn't buy. Is really the way I look at it. Or at least know the risks, right? And have somebody who can accurately explain those to you. Like when you mentioned doing an arm, arms aren't bad, but you got to know the risks, right? And the risk is that in 5 years you're still there, and rates are a lot higher, ultimately. So just being able to work with somebody who can explain the risks, and that's the other thing I would say is that it is, I say, well, it's a long-term investment, and I remember my cousin after the Great Recession, when the market actually crashed, he was complaining to me that he bought this condo and it went down in value, and he's having trouble selling it, and it's the government's fault, it's everybody's fault. And I said, hey, I said, ultimately you invested.
Yeah.
Okay. So, exactly. Investment carries risk. And at the bottom of all of your investments, what is the statement? Past performance does not indicate future, right? And so it's you know what I mean? And like, what is he's like, yeah, but I bought this condo, and every year real estate has gone up. It doesn't mean it's going to go up next year.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody knows the future. And that's just a fact.
The futures market.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what's hilarious too. When you look at the Fed lowering interest rates, right? Since the Fed has lowered rates, mortgage rates have gone up about a half a point.
Wow.
And everybody's like, I have all these borrowers that are like, I'm going to wait. Rates are going down. And now they're like, oh my God, I should have locked. And I'm like, yeah, I told you. Like, if you think, like, nobody in the history of the world has been able to predict the future, but you think you can? Like, no. Like, so.
Yeah. Well, cool.
But anyways, it was great. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for having us. Coming on. I'd love you to come back sometime. We can talk some more. Like
anytime.
Like when the housing market crashes next week, we'd like to have you back, because that's what I got out of the whole conversation. It's all happening next week. And you predicted it. 100%.
And rates are going down. Rates are going down.
But I
Housing's
also want to
crashed.
say, even if they don't need a mortgage person right now, they still should go follow you because your videos are
absolutely.
hilarious.
Oh,
Like you do
thank you.
so
Thank
many
you.
funny videos. Was on there, when we first talked, and I was like going through your videos, and like your songs and stuff are incredible.
Thank you. I appreciate
And
that.
so, anyone who has some time, and we all have free time sitting looking at our phone. Go,
If you want to be
go,
entertained with
yeah,
mortgage songs, you go to my
yeah.
my
Hey,
Insta
hey,
or TikTok or
yeah, and you'll learn something as you go,
yes.
and some of the songs are catchy, and you'll be like singing about like the description of a home, and you'll be
No,
like, why am I
you're
Oh,
singing
that's
this?
fantastic.
pretty
I've learned
catchy,
a
isn't
lot
it?
Yeah,
talking. So I know, I mean, you've been fantastic. If anybody needs any sort of real estate advice, I would definitely recommend you. I mean, you've been amazing.
All
I
right,
appreciate
that's you guys included.
yeah. Oh yes, definitely. So
Awesome.
but yeah, well, thank you for coming in, man. It
Thank you
was
guys.
great, and
All right,
Thanks.
have a great rest of your week, dude.
you
And
too.
hope your
Later, guys.
Bears win again next
Later.
week.
Go Bears.
See ya. So, man,
yeah, throw in the Bears. All right.
yeah.
Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You know,
So that was fun. That was interesting. I learned a few things I
yeah,
didn't know.
no, I
What
kind
did
of
you
felt
guys
bad.
learn?
I kind of monopolized his time. It seemed like I was asking him a lot of questions, but
That's
I was
fine, man.
very interested. I mean, the guy was very knowledgeable. I like the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Yeah.
definitely had his finger on the pulse of the real estate market. Not only that, but the financial market. I mean, he was talking about things outside of the housing
Yeah.
market that had a lot to do with things. I was very impressed with this guy. I was very glad that you found him. I hope we bring him back. I really
Oh
do.
yeah, definitely. And next time I'll say his name correctly when he comes on. And the thing is, I was so focused on trying to get his last name right because I mean, I'm bad with names, and so I was like practicing, and I even messed up his last name. I forgot the S, but it's like
I think maybe you just never say it right.
I never say anybody's name.
No, I'm
right,
just
man.
saying, going forward, bring him on.
Yeah,
again.
next time he comes on,
Completely different name.
hey, it's Mr. Bands. Come on in, and I'll do it.
No, he
But
was
hey,
fantastic. That was a great first interview.
yeah, that was a lot of fun, and thank you guys for coming in and being a part of it.
Yeah, no,
Even though
that was a lot
Nate
of
was
fun.
all over the place talking about Notre Dame and stuff, and but it's all right.
Like I said, I kind of apologize. I kind of hijacked the conversation at times, but no, he was a lot of fun to talk to, so I didn't feel bad about it. Really.
Yeah, no, he was great, and
Yeah,
we will have him back. I've been talking to him, but those of you checking us out, watching us, thank you, and again, comment below what is a plague that is bothering you, and we'll look into it. And if you have more questions about the housing market stuff, leave them below, and we'll forward them on to Mr. Kambs. And then you guys and go check his stuff out because it's pretty cool. All right. See ya.